Hi there, welcome to BBC London. Coming up, a train travelling at 90 miles per hour derails in southwest London after hitting an object. No one was injured, but there is widespread disruption.
Here at Waterloo Station, many trains are at a standstill and crowds are growing as the disruption continues. I'll have the latest.
Also ahead tonight.
At the moment, you're under arrest, okay? Accusing of kidnapping at the time.
We'll speak to the former Met detective who led the arrest of the man who murdered Sarah Everard ahead of a new BBC documentary. Plus, heroes of the water as the RNLI celebrates 200 years of saving lives. We look back at its history here on the Thames. And Lioness and Arsenal striker Alessia Russo talks FA Cup and inspiring the next generation of players. Hello and good evening to you. We start tonight with serious travel disruption on one of our busiest railway lines after a train travelling at 90 miles per hour struck an object on the line and derailed. No one was injured and Network Rail says all passengers were safely escorted from the train. South Western Railway has issued a warning for people not to travel on the Woking to Waterloo route, and in a moment we'll get the latest from our reporter at the station. First, here's our transport correspondent, Tom Edwards.
A stranded train at Walton-on-Thames in southwest London. Just before 6 a.m. it was the first train through here when, travelling at 90 miles an hour, it hit an object on the track and derailed. The train stayed upright, but it caused major damage, ripping out cabling and 60 metres of the power rail. Nick Dransfield was on the train at the time.
As we went past Woking, heading towards Walton-on-Thames, we hit something. There was a loud bang, and then the train juddered and performed an emergency stop. Sparks were erupting up the side of the train, clearly visible out of the window, and we performed an emergency stop, which seemed to go on for an awful long time. And you're just hoping sincerely that it didn't get any worse from there. Obviously, having driven a car and what have you, you always fear that you may end up hitting something else or obviously on a train, derailing.
So at the moment, we are investigating exactly what's caused this. But our priority is to move the train and to carry out the essential repairs through the rest of today to get the trains running again to allow passengers to make their journeys.
These are the derailed front wheels of the train. What was on the track hasn't been identified, but engineering work had just finished a few hours earlier. The incident happened on the fast line at Walton-on-Thames between Woking and Waterloo. The train was heading into London. At Waterloo, it has meant many cancellations and many trains not going anywhere, and no trains at all between Woking and the capital all day.
Very frustrating, very stressful.
By the time I got to Surbiton Station, the trains were cancelled or delayed.
It's very annoying, especially when I'm trying to get on time to things and make it back to my family.
Rail accident investigators have already visited the site. Experts say it could have been much worse.
The train was travelling at 90 miles an hour, and if it had derailed completely rather than just a couple of front wheels coming off, then it could have been a very serious incident, particularly if the train had collapsed on its side, and so it's very fortunate that nothing worse happened.
There were no injuries to staff or passengers who were evacuated from the train. No services, though, are expected between Woking and Waterloo until tomorrow at the earliest. Considerable repairs need to be done. Tom Edwards, BBC London.
Well, let's join Tolu Adeye now at Waterloo Station. And Tolu, what is the latest?
Yeah, an incredibly frustrating start to the working week for commuters. Things were incredibly busy here a little while ago. They're starting to ease up now as people are managing to scramble on some services that are running, but lots of frustrated people. I spoke to one person who managed to get on a train, and even once on the train there were delays, and she actually missed picking her child up from nursery. We've been here for a while. We've been looking to see the movement between trains going in and out. Lots of trains that we're seeing simply aren't going anywhere. Passengers have been queuing, waiting to see some movement. Now, Network Rail has said it's really sorry for the disruption to passengers and will update them on timescales for repairs. We've also heard from South Western Railway. It said there's obviously been a knock-on impact on lots of services. It says it's working to re-rail and recover the stranded train before Network Rail's engineering teams can complete these extensive works that have been described as complex. It's hoped that might be by tomorrow morning, but there's a risk it will not be, so passengers are being urged to check before you travel.
OK, Toulouse from Waterloo, many thanks. You're watching BBC London. Plenty more ahead this Monday evening, including...
Marking 200 years of the RNLI, I'm at one of the Thames lifeboat stations with a story of why London plays a significant role in the charity's history.
As we've been hearing, it's 3 years since Sarah Everard was abducted, raped and murdered by a serving Met officer. It sparked a national debate about the safety of women and girls and called for reform of the country's largest police force. Now, a new BBC documentary looks at the police investigation and the wider impact of the case. In a moment, I'll be speaking to the former Met detective who initially questioned Wayne Couzens. First, here's the moment he was arrested.
At the moment you're under arrest, okay? I'm speaking of kidnapping at the time.
You must know more about where she is or how I can find her.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
I know you know, and you
I don't know.
And the former Met detective who we saw there, who led the arrest of Wayne Couzens, Nick Harvey, joins me now. Thank you so much for coming in. You were actually on your way to question suspect Couzens at his house when you discovered that he was a serving officer. Does that moment stay with you?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Literally just arrived to brief the team around what we were going to do when DCI Goodwin calls me and breaks the news, and yeah, it just changed everything. The moment just completely changed.
And what did you think?
It just immediately become clear that everything was going to change from that point on. It was such a pivotal moment in policing history, and that was just abundantly clear.
And the pressure on you when you were interviewing Wayne Couzens, we saw a little bit of it there. What was that like?
Yeah, it's very challenging. It's not something that ever takes place, it's not commonplace. It's a very unusual event with very strict rules, and to know that, the smallest mistake could lead to that being inadmissible and could damage that case and stop Sarah from getting justice is, there's a lot of pressure there, and it's something that played heavily on my mind throughout.
Obviously there is a process that had to be gone through, but when you arrived and you spoke to Couzens, at that time he talked about the kidnapping, but did you feel confident at that point that you had caught Sarah Everard's killer?
Well, killer, no, at that point, we were still trying to find Sarah, and that was the primary thing was, what can I find out to help us find where Sarah was? Did I know the moment we walked in that it was the right person? Yeah, absolutely. The moment we opened the door, he just went grey, all the colour left his face. It was very, very clear that he was the right person.
And aside from the criminal investigation, we have talked and reported on the wider ramifications, both for the police and the debate around violence against women and girls. When you now, 3 years on, reflect about that moment, about the part that you played, how do you reflect on it?
I think it's rightly sparked a good level of debate and a call for some strong reflection within the Metropolitan Police and within policing generally on professionalism and how we approach it. And I'm just glad that I was able to play my part in helping the family, really, more than anything else. That's always been the most important thing to me.
OK. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate your time today. That's Nick Harvey, the former Met detective who led the arrest of Wayne Couzens. Thank you. And you can watch the full documentary, Sarah Everard, The Search for Justice, at 9 o'clock tomorrow evening here on BBC One, and it will also be available on iPlayer. Conservative MP and former Minister for London, Paul Scully, has announced he will step down at the next general election. The Sutton and Cheam MP apologised last week for saying parts of Tower Hamlets were no-go areas. He joins a growing number of Tory MPs who've confirmed they will not defend their seat. Well, our political editor, Tim Donovan, is in Westminster. Tim, what do you make of this?
Well, it didn't help last week, but this has its origins stretching back to last year, because Paul Scully was Minister for London. He was also a minister in the business department, and he applied or wanted to be the candidate to be Mayor of London. But when local Conservative members met and looked through the list of those applying, although he was an MP and although he was a Minister for London, he wasn't on the short list of 3. That really did hurt. He says that those members made that decision because he was going to be too close to government. But he still feels now that he was the best candidate and better than the one that the Tories did choose, Susan Hall.
You know, I believed I was the best candidate there, and I still believe that now. It'd be hypocritical or churlish of me not to think that. And what frustrates me is that it's effectively the Conservatives leaving the pitch in London, and I think it's sort of slightly disrespectful for London, to Londoners, that we're not selling ourselves as viable an option as we might do.
Now, Riz, it won't have helped that he made these comments suggesting that there could be areas, or people thought there would be areas in Tower Hamlets which were no-go areas. But Paul Scully insists he'd already made the decision, and it is clear that he thinks it's an uphill struggle for the Conservatives to win the mayoralty, but also clearly to form the next government. And what he's concluded, sadly, he says, is that he's not going to be part of the long-term solution.
OK, Tim, with the latest there, many thanks. That's our political editor, Tim Donovan, in Westminster. Now, the O2 Academy in Brixton is set to reopen in April, 16 months after a fatal crash at the live music venue, which left 2 people dead. 2 people died when ticketless fans tried to force their way into the venue. Today, the tragedy was the subject of a Crime Watch appeal. Police are still trying to identify 12 people they'd like to speak to, as Aisha Baksh reports.
Gabby Hutchinson from Gravesend was a security guard who, according to her loved ones, was dedicated to her job of keeping people safe. Rebecca Ekomelo was a nursing graduate from Newham with 2 young children. On the 15th of December 2022, they were both at the Brixton Academy. Rebecca was there on a rare night out, and Gabby was at work. But before the gig started, fans without tickets tried to force their way into the venue, and following a devastating crash, both died.
I saw the doctor. I said, no, I can't go and see her. My heart was broken. The shock was very, very difficult to process that time.
When we finally got to the hospital, they just told us that she was in a coma. She was just laying there, like she was asleep. She looked so beautiful, but she wasn't there. And I just remember going up to her and giving her a hug and a kiss and just saying, please wake up.
The impact, it's devastating, really. Just listening to the accounts from the victims' families, you understandably get a sense of just how distraught they are, how devastated they are. You know, this is 2 years later and they're still looking for answers.
And while the police investigation is still ongoing, the venue is now set to reopen. The Academy Music Group say they've developed new safety measures, including stronger doors, a better queuing system and more secure ticketing. The first gigs are scheduled for next month. Meanwhile, the Met Police say there are still 12 people they want to speak to about what happened and are keen for any concert goers who may have footage to get in touch.
Well, we've gathered a lot of CCTV, we've gathered a lot of evidence, documentary evidence. We've gathered a lot of statements from witnesses and from people that are working on the night. However, we know that there were hundreds of people, thousands of people inside that can potentially provide us with more information.
So a year on, we know people have videos, they have pictures, they know things, and if they would come forward to help the police in their investigation, it would bring a lot of closure, I suppose.
A 22-year-old woman who was also there that night is still in hospital in a very serious condition. Families impacted by this tragedy continue to look for justice. Aisha Baksh, BBC London.
Let's take a brief look now at some of the other news stories in and around the capital. Almost 21 years after a woman was murdered outside a police station in Bexley Heath, an inquest has opened into her death. Sabina Rizvi was shot dead by a convicted drug dealer in March 2003. Her family has been campaigning for a full inquest to consider whether the police contributed to her death. Around 160 people had to be evacuated from a block of flats in South Kensington and 13 taken to hospital after a fire on Friday. This dramatic footage shows the moment officers from the Met forced their way into the 5-storey block. A man's been arrested on suspicion of arson. And a tiny forest has been planted in the heart of a Bromley Park. The project saw 600 trees and shrubs planted at Cater Park in Beckenham following a successful fundraiser and cost £37,000. Next, a roaring lioness and Arsenal striker Alessia Russo, who only yesterday scored the winning goal in the North London derby against Tottenham. She's one of many England stars helping to bring the women's game to a wider audience and inspire the next generation. And she's been speaking to our reporter Lauren Moore, who joins us from Wembley. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, it's been a very exciting evening here so far at Wembley Stadium with some very good news for the 460 clubs that are a part of the Women's FA Cup competition. But more on that in a moment. It's also been a very exciting evening as we have some very special guests here, including England and Arsenal striker Alessia Russo. So Alessia is here tonight after that spectacular goal she scored in the second half yesterday against Tottenham Hotspur in the North London derby, winning the game 1-0 for the team and keeping Arsenal third in the WSL table, just closing that gap between league leaders Chelsea and Manchester City. So Alessia is also here this evening as she's being announced as the new ambassador for the new initiative project. It's the Women's FA Cup sponsor, and it's all about online content and helping these grassroots clubs involved in the competition with their social media, perhaps if they don't have the funding to do so. Well, here's what Alessia said when I spoke to her a bit earlier.
The women's game keeps growing and just invest in us as players and the clubs from the bottom up. And I think that they understand that obviously at grassroots level players have to juggle a lot of hats and try and make things work out. And yeah, they're here to help balance that and make sure that they can focus on the football as well.
Absolutely, and helping clubs kind of with their online content at such a lower level, as you mentioned, grassroots. How much can that help a club maybe that doesn't have that much funding?
I think it's massive. I mean, as we all know, that the, I guess, media side of the women's game is massive in promoting it and making sure that we're where we want to be today. And if these grassroots clubs can get the same level of backing and support that we do, then it's only going to help grow the game. So yeah, for us as players, it's exactly what we want to see.
Alessia Russo with me there, and it's a great week to hold this announcement as this weekend it's the Women's FA Cup quarter-final games, which involve two of our London sides, including Everton v Chelsea and Tottenham v Manchester City this Sunday.
OK, Lauren, thanks very much from Wembley. Well, from stars on the pitch to heroes on the water, the volunteers who give up their time to save others. Because today, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, or RNLI, which is all funded purely by donations, is celebrating its 200th anniversary. And it just so happens that the beginnings of the charity are very close to home. To tell us more, let's join Victoria in Chiswick, one of the busiest lifeboat stations in the country, Vic.
It is indeed, Riz, although very placid here on the Thames this evening. You might just be able to hear some geese or perhaps some rowers going past. But the boats, the crew's always ready to attend a potential emergency call here on the Thames. It's the second busiest station in London of the 4 lifeboat stations. In fact, the second busiest of anywhere in the country. Now, the Thames lifeboat stations may only have been in existence for just over 20 years, but in that time they've had more than 18,500 call-outs. They've saved more than 670 lives. Now, today a special service was held at Westminster Abbey to pay tribute to all those who've contributed to the charity in the last 200 years. Now, part of that involves a scroll. It is being taken around the country from Westminster Abbey. This was its second point in Chiswick, where it was signed, and on it has a dedication. "We are one crew ready to save lives," it says. Now, after that scroll arrived here in Chiswick, I caught up with some of the volunteers and those who give up their time for the charity, who all say the same thing. They're really proud to be part of it.
An institution that is 200 years and has been 200 years of life saving is unbelievably precious and important, especially in this world.
What an organisation. I'm very proud of my contribution, and I'm even more proud of all the people around me that contribute.
We are very much an emergency service in London. There's still many people do not realise we have 4 lifeboats on the Thames.
So far so good, and have been on a few shouts already.
Can you tell me what your mummy is doing?
Saving lives.
And what do you think about that?
Cool. It's cool.
Now, I've been out on one of these boats, and you will see more of that later in the week. But as you said, Riz, the charity does have a significant role in the life of London, or London rather, in the life of the RNLI. Its history is really steeped here, as I've been finding out. Tucked away in the archives of the RNLI, the story of how the charity, set up to save lives at sea, began on dry land in central London 200 years ago.
On the 4th of March 1824, in the City of London Tavern, a group of men got together to establish the charity. And what we have here are the minutes of the very first meeting. What they're setting out here is the core principles of the organisation.
The London Tavern Meeting House is long gone, but at the base of a gleaming tower in Bishopsgate, a tribute carved in stone remains. The record of the first meeting reads like a who's who of 19th century London society.
The person chairing the meeting was the Archbishop of Canterbury. Lots of MPs, City of London MPs. One of those MPs was William Wilberforce, the famous anti-slavery campaigner. So the minutes here are telling us what they want the charity to be, and 200 years later we're still holding strong to those.
London has a long connection with the RNLI. Its storeyard was in Poplar, where lifeboats ravaged by rescues at sea were repaired. There was a thriving boat building community there, and local firms were used to build lifeboats. But it would take the Marchioness disaster on the Thames in August 1989 for a dedicated lifeboat service to even be considered. 51 people lost their lives when the party boat collided with a dredger. Nearly 13 years later, in 2002, the Thames lifeboats came into service after a fundamental review of emergency response procedures on the river. Janet Kelly helped set up and then ran the Tower lifeboat station for 14 years.
It was a brand new thing, and there was some people who were saying, well, why do we need lifeboats on the Thames? We've got other emergency services, but of course the lifeboats are dedicated just to saving lives. The other emergency services not only do that, but they have other functions as well.
Tower lifeboat station is now the busiest anywhere in Europe, but Janet remembers it was a bit of luck that made it available for the RNLI in 2002.
The Thames Division, which is part of the Metropolitan Police, they didn't want their Waterloo Police Pier, which is by Waterloo Bridge. The police were very generous and allowed the RNLI to buy the pier for a token sum of £1.
But it was a very useful spot to have, I suppose.
For us in the middle of London, to be where we were there was priceless.
The Thames lifeboats have been called out more than 18,000 times since 2002. The RNLI works with all the other agencies on the river, including the police and the Port of London Authority, whose job it is to keep the river safe.
Over 80 people died in the water in 2002, and last year 27. But over 150 people ended up in the water, and that means 110 of them were recovered safely, and the RNLI have a huge role to play in that.
So what would its founders think of today's RNLI?
I think they'd be very proud indeed of where we've come. They would also recognise huge elements of the RNLI today and what they thought about all those years ago.
A celebration then of courage, commitment and donations that have helped save thousands of lives across 2 centuries. Victoria Hollins, BBC London.
Heroes of the water, and our heartfelt thanks for the work they do no matter the weather. So on that note, Kate is here with the forecast and a lovely bright start to the week.
It really was, but quite chilly to be out on the Thames this morning. It really felt a little bit more like winter, with temperatures overnight dropping down below zero. Had a little bit of frost first thing, but there are plenty of signs of spring out there. The flowers are in bloom, or the trees are in bloom. Magnolias, some blossom already blooming. So it did really feel a bit like spring this morning. Plenty of blue sky. Looked less like spring this afternoon, this veil of cloud, but the temperature perhaps said otherwise. Now you can see the front moving towards us. It's bringing the cloud. It's also bringing in a southerly breeze, and that's what's bringing this slightly less cold air. It's not going to feel so chilly as tonight as it did last night. The rain moving across as though it is quite a wet evening. One of those bursts heavy or so as we head through the night, but they will gradually start to clear north and eastwards. Further west, some breaks in the cloud could get a bit of mistiness as a result. The wind light, the minimum temperature staying above zero between 3 and 6 Celsius. When you see this front is going to linger just a little bit into tomorrow. It's really going to take its time to move eastwards. In the distance, you can see that high pressure system. That's just waiting in the wings, just starting to edge towards us by the time we get to the end of tomorrow. But in the meantime, it's quite a grey start. Still some showers around. They will gradually, as I said, start to move eastwards. Probably going to stay quite grey in the east. However, further west, some breaks in the clouds, some sunny spells, and temperatures tomorrow getting up to 12 Celsius. Now that front will gradually clear through the evening, then overnight it's dry and it's clear into Wednesday morning. The wind quite light too. The temperature's going to fall away. Again, it's going to be quite chilly with a minimum dropping down to zero. Might just get a bit of frost in the morning. Any mist and fog will lift. We'll see some bright spells for Thursday. This high pressure though is edging through. Now that's going to squeeze everything out of the way, and that's going to bring some fine conditions for Wednesday and for Thursday itself, with some sunshine. More chance of a shower though, as I've said, for Thursday. And the temperatures, they continue to get milder, and especially at night staying above zero, mid-single figures, and daytime temperatures staying in double figures. Riz.
And stays lighter longer too. Thanks, Kate. And that is it for now. So thanks very much for watching. Plenty more, though, of course, on our website and Instagram, though, including how a rare Ferrari stolen almost 30 years ago from an ex-Formula One driver in London has been recovered by police. And you can also check out the sound of the underground as buskers audition for prime pitches on the Tube. From me and everyone on the BBC London team, have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.